The night the canyon tried to swallow them all, Ethan Cole understood how small a man could feel and still be forced to choose who he was going to be. The storm had come without warning, the kind that turned sky and ground into one furious thing. Rain hammered the canyon walls, and wind tore through Black Ridge with a voice like it was calling for blood. Ethan was already late heading back to his cabin, his horse nervous beneath him, when the thunder cracked so close it felt like it split the world in two. Then he heard it, a deep, rolling groan from the rock face, followed by a sharp, final crash. Ethan pulled his horse to a halt. The sound wasn't distant. It was close. Too close. He dismounted, heart pounding, rain blinding him as he moved toward the base of the canyon wall. Another flash of lightning lit the ravine, and that was when he saw them. Two shapes near the rock slide, one sprawled against the stone, the other half kneeling, trying and failing to lift her. For a moment, Ethan froze. Every sensible thought told him to turn back. Rock slides didn't stop after the first fall. The ground beneath his boots shifted, warning him that the canyon was still angry. Then the kneeling figure looked up. Even through the rain, even through the chaos, their eyes met. There was pain in that look, but no fear. Just a sharp, steady awareness, like someone measuring whether a stranger was danger or hope. Ethan swore under his breath and moved forward. The rocks were heavier than he expected, slick with mud and rain. He wedged his shoulder under one slab and pushed until his muscles burned. Stone scraped, then rolled free. The woman pinned beneath it groaned softly but didn't cry out. "Easy," Ethan said. Though he wasn't sure they understood him, he spoke anyway. Silence felt wrong. Another thunderclap shook the canyon. Pebbles rattled down from above. Ethan knew he had seconds, maybe less, before the mountain decided again. He freed the second woman first, pulling her clear as she nearly collapsed against him. She was lighter than she looked, soaked through, breathing hard but still on her feet. She immediately turned back toward the one still trapped, hands already searching for leverage. That's when Ethan noticed the way she moved. Not panicked, trained. Together, without planning it, they worked. Ethan shifted stones while the woman guided him with sharp gestures and brief words he didn't understand. When the last rock finally gave way, the injured woman sagged forward. Ethan caught her just before she hit the ground. Lightning flashed again, close enough to leave spots in his vision. He didn't wait. He lifted the injured woman into his arms, ignoring the sharp protest from his own back, and led them toward his horse. The standing woman hesitated for half a second, scanning the canyon like she expected enemies to rise from the rain itself. Then she followed. The ride back to the cabin felt longer than it was. The injured woman drifted in and out of awareness, her breathing shallow but steady. Ethan kept one hand on the reins and the other braced around her, murmuring useless reassurances the storm swallowed whole. When the cabin finally appeared, a dark shape against darker hills, Ethan felt a strange, unexpected relief, followed immediately by doubt. Bringing strangers home was a risk. Bringing two women found in a canyon during a storm was a bigger one. But he didn't slow down. Inside, the cabin was cold, but dry. Ethan laid the injured woman on his narrow bed, lighting the oil lamp with shaking hands. The other woman stood near the door, watching him with the same sharp focus as before. Her eyes moved over the room, the windows, the walls, cataloging exits, threats, truths. Ethan met her gaze briefly. He raised his empty hands, slow and open, then turned back to the woman on the bed. He worked carefully, doing what he could with what little he had. Cleaning mud and blood, checking for breaks, keeping his movements deliberate, controlled. He felt the weight of being watched, measured not just as a man, but as a choice. Outside, the storm continued to rage, sealing them all inside the canyon and into one another's fate. Ethan didn't know their names. He didn't know where they came from, or what kind of trouble might follow them through his door. What he knew What settled heavy in his chest as the rain battered the walls was that whatever this night had begun, it wasn't going to end when the storm passed. The rain did not stop right away. It softened, then returned, then softened again, as if the storm itself could not decide whether to let the night rest. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of wet earth, oil from the lamp, and wood that had soaked up too many winters. Ethan moved slowly, careful not to startle either woman. He filled a small pot with water and set it near the fire, watching until steam began to rise. He said nothing unless it mattered. Silence felt safer than questions. The injured sister lay on the bed, her eyes half open. Pain sat on her face, but she did not complain. The other woman stood a few steps away, back straight, shoulders squared despite the long night. She never stopped watching him, not once. Ethan knelt by the bed and checked the bandage he had tied earlier. It was holding. He nodded to himself, then reached for clean cloth. "I will change this," he said quietly, keeping his voice even. He waited. The standing woman studied him, then gave a short nod. He worked with steady hands. No rush, no hesitation. He avoided touching more than he had to. When the injured woman tensed, he paused until her breathing slowed again. The standing woman noticed everything. How he looked away when the cloth slipped. How he placed tools within reach, then stepped back. How he kept his body turned sideways, never blocking the door. "You are alone here," she said at last. Her English was careful, shaped by effort. "Yes," Ethan answered. He didn't add more. "Why?" Ethan thought for a moment. "It's quieter," he said. That was true enough. The woman gave a faint, thoughtful sound. Not quite approval, not quite doubt. She moved closer to her sister, resting a hand on the edge of the bed. Her touch was protective, but not fearful. When Ethan finished, he stepped back fully and washed his hands. He dried them on his trousers, then sat on a low stool near the wall, far enough to give space. The younger sister stirred. Her eyes opened wider now, dark and searching. She looked at the ceiling, then the walls, then at Ethan. Her gaze sharpened when she realized where she was. "You're safe," Ethan said quickly. "Storm's bad, but you're safe here." She swallowed, then looked to her sister. Whatever passed between them needed no words. Minutes stretched. The rain filled the quiet when no one spoke. Ethan added wood to the fire, then sat again. He did not ask their names. He did not ask where they came from. He knew enough to understand that questions could wait. The older sister broke the silence. Many men would ask for payment. Ethan frowned slightly. "I didn't do this for payment." She studied his face as if testing the truth of that answer. "Many say that," she replied. "I'm not many," he said, then stopped himself. The words sounded like pride. He didn't mean them that way. "I just couldn't leave you out there." That answer seemed to settle something. The younger sister let out a slow breath, the kind someone takes when they realize they will live through the night. Ethan stood and fetched a blanket. He held it out instead of placing it himself. The older sister took it and covered her sister carefully. "You sleep?" Ethan asked. The younger sister shook her head. "Not yet." "That's fine," he said. "I'll be here." He moved closer to the door and leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely, posture relaxed but alert. He made no move toward the bed again. Time passed in small sounds. The fire cracked. Rain tapped the window. The injured woman's breathing evened out. The older sister finally sat on the floor, back against the bed, eyes still open. She watched Ethan from where she sat. He looked tired. Lines of worry showed around his eyes, but there was no hunger there. No calculation. Just a man holding a line he had chosen not to cross. "You were not afraid," she said quietly. "In the canyon." "I was," Ethan answered without thinking. "I just went anyway." That earned him another long look. This one was different. Less sharp. More measured. Outside, the storm began to move on. Inside the cabin, something else took its place. Thin, fragile, and real. Trust did not announce itself. It settled slowly, like dust after rain. None of them knew yet what this night would demand in return. But as the silence stretched, it became clear that something had already changed, and there was no going back to how things had been before the storm. The fire had burned down to a low glow by the time the night began to change. Not outside. There, the sky was still dark. But inside the cabin, where the silence had taken on a different weight. The kind that comes before a truth is spoken. Ethan had not moved much for a long while. He sat near the door, listening to the sounds of breathing behind him, measuring time by the slow pop of wood in the hearth. He told himself this was just another long night, like the many he had spent alone. Yet his thoughts kept circling back to the same feeling, that something unseen was closing in, and once it arrived, nothing would be simple again. The older sister rose first. Her movements were careful, quiet, but certain. She stood near the fire for a moment, warming her hands, then spoke without turning around. "My name is Ayla," she said. Ethan nodded. "I'm Ethan." The younger sister stirred at the sound of voices. She pushed herself up slowly, wincing, then sat against the headboard. Her eyes were clearer now, more alert. "I am Seren," she said. Ayla looked at her sister, then back at Ethan. "We have spoken," she continued, "while you waited." Ethan felt his shoulders tighten. He didn't know why, only that some part of him already sensed the direction this night was turning. Serene drew a breath, steady but deep. "You showed us restraint," she said. "You showed us respect. That matters." Ethan shifted on his stool. "I just did what was right." Ayla turned then, meeting his eyes fully. "That is why this is difficult." The words hung there. Ethan felt an old memory surface, uninvited, the face of his father, worn and tired, telling him once that doing the right thing often meant standing alone afterward. Ethan had not understood it then. He was starting to now. Serene spoke again, her voice softer. "In our way, a choice has been made." Ethan frowned. "What kind of choice?" Both sisters looked at him together, not pleading, not demanding, certain. "We have chosen you," Ayla said. The room seemed to shrink. Ethan stood up slowly, as if sudden movement might break something fragile. "You don't know me," he said. "Not really." "We know enough," Serene replied. "You could have taken advantage. You did not. You could have asked questions. You waited." Ethan turned away, rubbing a hand over his face. "You don't understand what you're asking." Ayla stepped closer, but stopped well short of touching him. "We do, and we also know what it costs." That was the moment the night twisted. Not louder, not sharper, deeper. Seren's voice trembled as she continued. "Before the storm, we were already running out of time. Our people believe we are gone. If we return, there will be judgment." Ethan looked back at them. "Judgment for what?" "For choosing the same path," Ayla said simply. "For choosing the same man." Ethan felt the weight of the words settle into his chest. He thought of the land outside, the quiet years he had carved out with his own hands. He thought of how easy it would be to step back, to tell them they were mistaken, to let the world return to its familiar shape. "I can't promise you anything," he said slowly. "I don't belong in your world." Serene's eyes filled, though she did not let the tears fall. "And yet, for one night, you stood between us and death." Silence followed. Not empty silence, but full, packed with choices and consequences. Ethan remembered another night, years ago, when he had walked away from a fight he knew would ruin him, even though it meant being called weak. He had survived that choice, but survival had come at a cost. Loneliness, regret, a life half-lived. He looked at the sisters now, and understood the truth he had been avoiding. Walking away was still an option. It always would be, but it would shape him, just as staying would. You should know, Ayla said quietly, that this path brings danger. From our people. From yours. Ethan met her gaze. I've lived with danger before. Serene reached out then, stopping just short of his arm. We do not ask for an answer tonight. Ethan exhaled slowly. The storm outside had faded to a distant whisper. Dawn was not far off. I won't send you away, he said at last. Not tonight. It wasn't a promise, it wasn't a refusal, but it was enough to change everything. Morning came cold and clear, as if the storm had never existed. Sunlight spilled into Black Ridge Canyon, touching wet stone and broken earth, revealing the damage left behind. What the night had hidden, the day now exposed. Ethan stood outside his cabin when he heard them. Not voices at first, but movement, measured, organized. Horses, many of them. Ayla heard it too. She stepped out beside him, her posture calm, her face unreadable. Seren followed more slowly, still weak but steady on her feet. None of them spoke. There was no need to. The riders emerged from the canyon bend in a wide line. Men and women, armed but controlled, their expressions firm rather than hostile. They stopped at a distance, watching. Then one man rode forward alone. He was older, broad-shouldered, his hair streaked with gray. His presence carried weight without force. He dismounted and stood, eyes fixed on his daughters. Ayla inclined her head slightly. Serene did the same. My daughters were believed lost, the man said. His voice was steady, but the words were heavy. And yet here they stand. Ethan felt every eye shift toward him. He resisted the urge to straighten or step back. He stayed where he was, hands visible, shoulders square. We were helped, Ayla said. By him. The man studied Ethan now, slowly, thoroughly, not with anger, but with judgment. You are the rancher, he said. It was not a question. Yes, Ethan replied. The man nodded once. I am Marrow. No title followed, but none was needed. The others waited for his next word. We will return, Marrow said. All of us. This will be spoken of before the people. There was no refusal in that statement, only direction. The journey to the settlement passed in silence. Ethan rode behind the sisters, aware of how out of place he looked among them. His worn clothes an unfamiliar seat among riders who moved as one. No one spoke to him. No one threatened him either. When they arrived, the people gathered quickly. News traveled fast. Faces appeared, curious, guarded, watchful. Ethan felt the weight of 100 eyes settle on him, each one measuring his worth, his intent. They stood in the open council area. Marrow stepped forward. Ayla and Seren moved to his side. My daughters have returned, Marrow said, and they bring a matter that concerns us all. Ayla did not wait to be asked. She stepped forward, voice clear. We choose Ethan Cole. A low murmur moved through the crowd. Seren stepped beside her sister. Together. Ethan felt his chest tighten. This was no quiet confession in a cabin. This was a line drawn in daylight. Marrow raised a hand, and the murmurs faded. He turned to Ethan. You are not of our people, he said. Yet you stand here by their will. Ethan nodded. I do. You sheltered them, Marrow continued. You asked for nothing. Yes. Marrow's eyes narrowed slightly. And now you are bound to a choice you did not seek. Ethan thought of the cabin, the storm, the moment he could have turned away. I stayed, he said simply. Marrow was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried to every edge of the gathering. There are two paths before you, he said. You may leave today. Walk back to your life unchanged. No harm will follow you. Ethan waited. Or, Marrow continued, you may stay, but staying means more than words. You will give up what you were. You will face trials. You will be judged not once, but many times. The crowd was still now. Even the wind seemed to pause. Ayla looked at Ethan, her face calm but intent. Serene's hand trembled slightly at her side. Ethan felt the old pull of retreat rise in him. The easy road. The known road. He thought of the land he had worked, the fences, the quiet evenings. He also thought of the night in the canyon, and the cost of walking away from what mattered. "What if I fail?" Ethan asked. Marrow answered without hesitation. "Then you will leave. Alive. Changed." Ethan nodded slowly. He looked once more at the sisters, then back at Marrow. "I will stay," he said. The words settled into the ground like a promise that could not be taken back. Days passed without Ethan noticing how many. Time shifted its meaning once the trials began, measured less by sunrise and more by what his body and mind could endure. He slept where he was told, ate what was given, and spoke only when spoken to. No one treated him unkindly, but no one offered comfort either. The first trial tested his strength. He was sent into the hills at dawn with simple instructions and no guidance. The path was steep, the air thin, and the weight he carried unfamiliar. More than once, his legs shook and his breath burned. Each time he considered stopping, he remembered the night in the canyon, the choice already made. He reached the marked stone by dusk, not proud, only certain he had not turned back. The second trial tested his judgment. Elders spoke in turns, presenting questions without clear answers. They asked about land, loyalty, and loss. Ethan answered honestly, even when the truth made him look uncertain. He admitted fear. He admitted doubt. When pressed to speak of belonging, he said only that respect came before claims. The elders listened. They did not nod. They did not argue. The third trial tested his courage in a quieter way. He was left alone overnight on sacred ground, with no fire and no sound but wind moving through stone. Memories came uninvited, faces from his past, choices he had avoided. He felt the pull to leave before dawn, to step away while he still could. Instead, he stayed until the light returned, knowing something inside him had been stripped down and reshaped. When the trials ended, he was brought to the ceremonial circle. The tribe gathered, not in celebration, but in witness. Ayla stood to one side, composed as ever. Serene stood close, emotion visible but steady. Chief Marrow faced Ethan, his expression unreadable. "You have endured," Marrow said. "Not without fault, not without cost." Ethan met his gaze. "I didn't come to be flawless." A faint shift passed through the circle. Marrow continued. "You have given up the life you knew. You cannot return to it as you were." Ethan thought of the cabin, the fences, the long, quiet evenings. He felt no regret, only a sense of distance, like looking back at a place already fading. "I understand," he said. Marrow nodded once. "Then you will be welcomed." What followed was simple. Words spoken aloud. Commitments made before witnesses. No grand display. Just truth placed where it could be seen. Ethan stood between Ayla and Seren. He felt their presence on either side of him, different in nature, equal in strength. This was not a reward. It was a joining, layered with responsibility. As the gathering ended, people approached him, not all with smiles, but with acknowledgement. He was not fully theirs. Not yet. Perhaps not ever in the way some were. But he was no longer an outsider. That night, as the fire burned low and voices faded, Ethan sat alone for a moment at the edge of the circle. He felt the weight of what he had gained and of what he had left behind. He was not the man who had ridden out into the storm. That man still existed, somewhere, but he no longer led. Ayla joined him first. "You did not hesitate," she said. "I did," Ethan replied. "I just didn't let it stop me." Serene sat on his other side, resting her shoulder lightly against his arm. "That is what matters." Ethan looked out toward the dark line of the canyon in the distance. Somewhere beyond it stood a cabin that would remain empty. Somewhere ahead lay a future he could not fully see. He felt no certainty, no perfect peace, only the steady knowledge that he had chosen a path that asked something of him every day. And as the night settled over the land, Ethan understood this truth with quiet clarity. Some storms pass, some shape you, and some decide who you become long after the thunder is gone.